Hi everybody, welcome to Friday's Meet the Expert with Sekoya Specialist Employment Services. We're joined today by Tim, the Profit Doctor. We have been sent in a multitude of different questions via people that can't be here to ask them themselves. So the majority of questions will come from me, if that's okay with you ladies. And Tim, if you've got any questions, please do ask away. Donna, Emma, Tim, do you want to quickly introduce yourselves, please?
Ladies first.
Go for it, Emma.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name's Emma Roberts. I'm a HR director working with Sekoya and have lots of experience in HR over too many years than I care to remember now. But hopefully we can share some of that experience today with you.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Donna Morcom. I'm an employment solicitor. And again, that's been probably feels more years than it is, but a very, very long time dealing with both employee and employer disputes, as well as helping people with their internal HR. So thank you very much for inviting us on this morning to have a chat and hopefully answer some questions.
Thank you. And Tim.
Thank you, Jade. Good morning, ladies. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Jackson, coming to you from the Emerald Isle of Northern Ireland. And the aim of my business is to help your business crack what I call the rhythmic acquisition of customers, because so many problems in business can be fixed with more customers. Back to you, Jade.
Perfect. Right. We will dive straight in with a question that I was sent in. Right. My new contract includes a restrictive covenant in it. Am I okay to sign it, please?
Oh, Donna, that's one for you.
Right. So restrictive covenants are clauses that are in a person's contract which restrict them from working or doing things after their employment has come to an end. If you've got those restrictions in your contract, the likelihood is, if that's not been drafted by a lawyer, it probably isn't enforceable anyway. But if it is in your contract and it is enforceable, you're probably not going to get away without signing it. So, and albeit there is case law that says if you haven't signed your contract and the restrictions aren't signed, then they don't bite, unlike normal contractual restrictions, which say that as long as you've continued to work under your contract, you're continued to have, you're deemed to have accepted what's in it. That's not the same for restrictive covenants, because they restrict what you can do after you've finished your employment. However, even if you went back to your employer, I'm assuming this is an employee, a potential employee, even if you go back to your employer and explain that, you could try and negotiate the period over which it runs. The reality of it is that if it is a quick turnover of clients' business, the employer is not going to get away with any more than 3 to 6 months. If they have put in more than 3 to 6 months in their contract, and it's not, say, for professional services, you may not want to negotiate it, because if you ever need to get out of it, it'll be unenforceable. So if you negotiate it, you might well make it enforceable. The other thing is, if you don't sign the contract, they may not bite, albeit if you're then receiving the remuneration after the point that you have seen those restrictions, or something else is put into place that acts as what we call consideration, which is something that's money or for money's worth, so some additional holiday or a bonus scheme or something like that, that will mean that the court are going to say, well, you were happy to take the good bits, and therefore we have to deem that you took the bad bits with it, i.e. the restrictions. If you haven't taken the good bits, i.e. you weren't, there was no change in remuneration, there was no extra holidays, no extra bonus, there was nothing extra, then the restrictions probably wouldn't bite. But you'd need to take some, I'm happy to look at them, by the way, for nothing. If anybody, whoever it is, wants to send it to me, my email address is freely available. I'm always happy to have a quick look. But if they've not been drafted by a specialist lawyer, the reality is they're probably not enforceable anyway.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, the next question is, if employees are transferred under 2p?
2p, yeah.
2p. After the 28th of Feb 2020, can the new employer put them on furlough leave?
Well, we've got this situation at this moment in time, actually. Emma, you're nodding. Do you want to jump in?
No, you go for it. You go for it.
Yeah, so as I understand it, and we're currently looking into this at this moment in time, if they weren't on that person's payroll before that date, then they can't be furloughed. So what we're doing with a different business at the moment is that we are delaying the transfer of some of those employees to allow them to be continually furloughed under the previous employer.
Right, okay.
And then at such time as, you know, as furlough comes to an end, then they'll be transferred.
Good to know. Thank you very much. Tim, did you have something to ask?
Yeah, I do have a question, ladies. I'm considering bringing on my first member of staff, and obviously contract of employment would be something that we would be looking at. What sort of pitfalls or what sort of things should we be looking at including into a contract? Should it be, should we just pick up a template from online, or does it need to be a specific template? Is there any kind of things that come this past sort of year that need to be included that maybe wouldn't be in one before? I'd appreciate your input and thoughts on that, please.
Well, I'm going to make a start and then I'm going to hand over to Emma. First of all, congratulations that you're thinking about taking on your first employee. That's amazing. So from a contractual point of view, and lots of people download contracts, and everybody's probably thinking, oh, yes, but you're going to say that because you want to be able to, draft the contracts. Absolutely not the case. Please do not ever download a template from the internet, especially when it comes to employment things. There are thousands of employment changes in the law every year in employment law. It's the fastest growing area of law. This year, more than most. So please do not download templates off the internet. There are organisations such as the FSB, which have some templates that you can use because those are kept up to date. But remember that, and they're absolutely fine for a very basic contract, which will get you over the needing to provide a contract from day one, which you have to do now.
Yep.
But if the relationship breaks down, remember that what is contained in that document is the only thing that's going to legislate for what happens between you and the employee. So you are going to want to have something that covers you in the case of, a relationship breakdown, something that covers you in lots and lots of areas, which I'll let Emma run into. But anything that you want to protect you as an employer needs to be in that contract of employment, which is why it needs to be bespoke. So the standard template ones that you can buy from, for example, the FSB are, it's fine. It's a bit like driving. It's a bit like buying maybe a Citroen. It'll get you from A to B, and it'll be fairly reliable. It'll get you there even when it's cold. However, what you want is something like a Jag, really, because it'll get you there in comfort and it'll look after you. So if there is an accident, you're going to walk away from that accident without a scratch on you. Whereas if you've bought a 20-year-old Citroen, that's probably not going to be the case. You're going to have a few bumps and bruises. So that's why we suggest that you have stuff drafted properly, especially as it's a one-off cost that you then give that same contract to everybody. So it's in the reality of it, it's a very small investment to make for what is probably going to cost you the most money if it goes wrong. But I'll hand over to Emma to give you a few pointers on what you should probably have in it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Donna.
Just in addition to what Donna's just said, you need to be really careful when you're searching on the internet, because sometimes you might bring up an old document. And unfortunately, in employment law, there's on average 1,200 to 1,600 employment law changes every year. So you need to make sure that if you're getting something off the internet, that it is up to date, because otherwise you could get yourself into trouble for a starter for 10 straight away. So always good to check with somebody on those things. For me, as well as that legal contract, what you're actually doing is making a psychological contract with your new employee about them coming to work for you and building that whole relationship. And what this contract does is then cement that with the stuff to protect both of you if there's any problems moving forward. So you need to make sure you've got things in there like their holidays, how much holiday they get, how do they take it, is there any periods you don't want them to take it? So if you close down between Christmas and New Year, you state that in your contract, they're aware of that straight away, and you're building up that relationship piece. Also things like your expected levels of behaviour, so what your disciplinary policy is, what your grievance policy is if they're not happy, and point them in the direction of those. And most new employees these days are used to having a probationary period, so that's a settling in period for both people, so you've got that opportunity to develop that relationship. So it's important to mention that in there as well, and get that across. I think those for me are probably the really key things, because for me it's a basis of opening up a conversation with somebody and talking to them about your expectations of them as an employee, and also what they expect from you. Because that recruitment process should be a two-way process, not just about you picking the right person. They've got to make sure they want to come and work with you as well.
Thank you very much, ladies. The sort of number one thing that I picked up there, that I never knew that there was thousands of changes to employment law every year. Who knew?
Mm-hmm.
It's the fastest growing area of law. I should have picked land law, like that hasn't changed since like 25.
You like a challenge though, Donna, don't you?
Oh yeah.
It's certainly that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Right, next question we've been sent. My doctor said that I am vulnerable to a bad form of COVID and must have an occupational health assessment before returning to work. The company that I work for are refusing to carry out the assessment. What can I do?
Wow. We've got a GP suggesting that someone has an occupational health assessment.
That's music to my ears.
That is music to my ears. Wow, I don't think that's ever happened before. In the whole world. Do you get crack on? You can answer that one.
Well, I think again it's about building that relationship with your employer and making sure that both sides understand what that vulnerability is. I would recommend that if the employer doesn't want to do the OH, because there is a cost involved in that they might want to write to the doctor and fully understand what the issues are and ask the doctor to write back to them and explain it. There might still be a cost from the GP for doing that, and various doctors charge different amounts ranging from £50 up to £200 I've seen for some different things. So there is a cost implication there, but the doctor might be able to do that. But it's about understanding what that vulnerability is, because actually as an employer you've got an obligation to then risk assess what those issues are and ensure that your employee is safe at work under the Health and Safety at Work Act. So that's not necessarily employment law, but it is still a responsibility as an employer to do that. If you can encourage them to send you to occupational health, I would do it, because what occupational health does is different to what a doctor does. Your GP will talk about your medical condition and the impacts of your medical condition. What an occupational health person does is they look at that in conjunction with what your role is. So as an employer, you need to explain to them what the day-to-day responsibilities of that individual is, what they might be doing, who they come into contact with, and then they can advise based on the condition what they might recommend to make adjustments so that that person can be in the workplace. If again they don't want to do any of that, can the job be done from home at the moment so that they're not being put in a vulnerable situation? That could be another discussion to have with them to see if they can actually, carry on working.
I mean, and kind of following on from that, Emma, that was a brilliant answer. Just following on from that, there is a legal responsibility to look after your employees. If that person is shielding, then because we're back to shielding again, then obviously they can be furloughed. So the employer could furlough them. If there is an issue, and I'm getting that there may well be a bit of rub here between the employee and the employer, and that the employee is saying that my doctor has suggested that we have this done, and the employer is saying no. Before you get entrenched in a dispute, the best way of doing things is sitting down with the employer and explaining why this needs to happen. And actually, maybe, could someone come along who's perhaps HR trained, who might be able to mediate, to be able to help that employer? I mean, most of our work has come from situations where I have sued the employer on behalf of the employee in one, and then we've picked up the employer's work later on. So, it is sometimes the case that employers aren't informed, or aren't as informed as well as they think they are, and actually being able to very gently mediate between them and explain in a non-confrontational way why this needs to happen and what the ramifications are, without it being, you've got to do this, and if you don't, then I'm going to do X and Y. That's very confrontational, and you get so much more, you get so many more bees, with honey than you do with vinegar. So it is always a better way to go, to try and take that line of, look, I don't think my employer understands, and I need to very gently, without making them feel like I'm telling them what to do, make them understand why I need to do this. And again, happy to come and mediate if that's helpful. I make those sorts of phone calls all the time. So happy to mediate.
I absolutely agree with what you're saying there, Donna, because sometimes the employer just isn't educated enough, and they're kind of like, I don't understand, I'm being pulled this way and I'm being pulled this way, which way is the right way and which way is the answer, and just that sort of gentle sort of helping them to be more informed in a non-confrontational way, because employers have so much other stuff going on at the minute, and it's just to be able to be informed, to know what the right decision is, so it doesn't get to a tribunal. I think that's very kind and very valuable what you offer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, next question. Are you able to please talk me through notice pay during sickness absence, as I'm getting conflicting requirements?
Now this is not something that we can necessarily answer today. And the reason I'm going to say that is because it depends on how long the person has been there. It depends on how long they've been off sick for. It's really complex, because notice pay during sickness absence has to be, it is decided in a very, very different way. So I'm really sorry, only because it would take me about 20 minutes to run through all of the different options. But if that person wants to give us a shout, I will help them for nothing, but I just need to know the background bit so that I can, because otherwise I'm going to bore everybody with calculations over the next 20 minutes rather than answering questions. But that is a brilliant question, and almost every person that asks us that has gone to go and get advice elsewhere, and it is, and that is not a slight on any other professional. It is a very complex calculation. So, and if you're not doing it all the time, it's very easy to get wrong. But I'm very happy, if whoever that is, if they want to drop me an email, I can just work it out for them and send it back to them. I'm more than happy to do that for nothing.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I think we will finish on this last question. And if you wouldn't mind, ladies, at the end, if you could just dictate your email addresses and contact details for people listening, that would be great. Thank you. So the last question, can my employer force me to go on furlough?
Yes. That's a very simple answer. I've done a lot of speaking, so I'll let Emma answer that one. But the short answer,
go on. You're the expert on furlough. You're the furlough queen. I'm going to leave that one to you.
So yes, the answer is yes. The whole point of furlough is that where the amount of work that your business has that's fallen away, if you don't have a need for that employee at this present time, you absolutely can force them onto furlough. They only get a maximum of 80%. And unfortunately, if that leaves them in a situation where they are, because 20% of someone's pay, I mean, I was in an argument with a solicitor on the other side of a matter, quite a big matter that we're dealing with at the moment, and he's acting for the employer, and his response was, well, 20% is nothing, it's peanuts. I said 20% to somebody who is on who's not on much more than national minimum wage is a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
So and there are going to be people who are going to struggle on that. You are, as an employee, they are able to go and get another job whilst they're on furlough. And I would urge people to do that, to make up at least the 20%, if not more, if they're taking on other hours. You can flexibly furlough people too. So, you know, if you only need somebody part of the time, but again, you can enforce it. And if you can't force people to work on days they wouldn't ordinarily have worked. So if you flexibly furlough someone and they normally work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you can't say, well, actually, I now only want you Thursday and Friday and part of Friday, because those are days they wouldn't normally work. But you can flexibly furlough them for the other days. But yes, you can force somebody onto furlough, unfortunately. But the reality of it is, if it's that or redundancy, what would you prefer? Because that is the ultimate decision. Is, well, if I can't furlough you, and if you're going to kick off about it, then the only other option I have is to make your role redundant.
Brilliant. Right, well, thank you very, very much. That was another incredibly insightful Meet the Experts panel, so I really appreciate it, and I hope that for those listening and those who've asked those questions, the answers have been given, and they are what you want to hear. So if you wouldn't mind, Donna and Emma, just giving us your email addresses, please, that would be great.
Yeah, so my email address, and we're all quite easy at Sekoya. So mine is Donna@Sekoya, SEKOYA.com.
And mine's Emma.Roberts@Sekoya.com.
Spot the fact that we've had a previous Emma employee who's sadly no longer with us in all sorts of senses. So unfortunately, we could have created another Emma@Sekoya.com, but it just didn't feel right.
No.
So unfortunately, Emma is the only one who's got her surname in her email address. But if you want to contact anybody at Sekoya apart from Emma, we are just our first names at Sekoya.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Please join us next week as we meet the expert again at 3 o'clock. But for now, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.